Hey everyone, it's me Lone. I hope you're doing alright. It has been a while and I feel like I keep saying that and then not making any videos for weeks on end. I really do apologize about it this time. There is a good reason behind it. It's been a long and hard last couple of weeks and I'm hoping I can explain myself in a video on the channel sometime soon. But until then, we've got a bunch of Starfield stuff that I want to talk about. So if you enjoy this video, please do like, I would really appreciate it. Subscribe if you are new. But we have three big topics that I want to talk about today. The first one is obviously the biggest. It has to do with Starfield's latest PC update, which is currently in beta on Steam. Second of all, we'll be talking about how currently there are more people playing Skyrim than Starfield on Steam, which has caused a bit of a debate to say the least. And third, we'll be talking about how Todd Howard just revealed how many employees and staff members at BGS are still working on Starfield, and by implication, how many are probably working on the Elder Scrolls 6. So it's going to be a good video. All the sources are linked in the description below. But first of all, let's talk about that latest update. So as I said, it is currently in Steam beta. And it's the long-awaited update that introduces DLSS. But importantly, there are also other improvements made to Starfield, particularly when it comes to performance and frame rate, that are separate from DLSS. So it's a really good site to see. If you want to get a full rundown of everything, there is a Digital Foundry video in the description below, and that's where I'm getting everything that I'm talking about in today's video. Honestly, I love those guys. So first of all, let's talk about DLSS, the big one. DLSS, DLAA, NVIDIA Reflex Low Latency, Frame Generation, it's all here and it's long awaited and thank God it has happened. And the really good news is that the official DLSS implementation by Bethesda Game Studios is reportedly just as good as the community DLSS mod. And I think, when was that revealed or released? That was like 1 or 2 days after launch. They were so quick with it, and it's what, almost 3 months later and we still just got DLSS in Steam beta. But at the very least, we finally have it officially, and it's looking to be just as good as the community mod. So awesome to see, and obviously it's way better than FSR2, especially obviously you have to have an NVIDIA card to be able to use DLSS, but if you have an NVIDIA card, you are going to want to use DLSS over FSR2, especially when it comes to image stability and anti-aliasing. DLSS is just so much better. That Digital Foundry video shows some comparisons which make FSR2 look like arse when it comes to anti-aliasing. I know that FSR2 and FSR in general has its benefits, especially because you can use it on any graphics card, which is good. It's a good baseline, it's a good backup. But if you have an NVIDIA card, there's no doubt that DLSS is better, especially when you can utilize frame generation. And if you can utilize frame generation, you're getting huge performance improvements on Starfield. You're getting crazy high frame rates. And in fact, the frame rates were getting so high per Digital Foundry, it's revealed that Starfield actually has a frame rate cap. If you remember back in the day, it's not even back in the day, but Fallout 76, Fallout 3, all these Bethesda Game Studios games, they all had a frame rate cap of about 60 frames per second. And if you try to uncap that and go beyond it, it would cause all sorts of physics issues with the engine in the game. Like the game would essentially be sped up and would cause a bunch of other issues. And they obviously didn't do that for Starfield. It was improved. But frame generation, allowing frame rates to go so high, made Digital Foundry see there's actually a frame rate cap of 160 frames to about 167 frames per second in the game, which is just crazy. Like, if this is true, I don't know why BGS decides to implement these arbitrary frame rate limits to not have any issues in the game. I just don't know why it's designed like that. It's frustrating. Now, it's not going to affect people like me that run at 4K, so I'm not going to get anywhere close to 165 frames per second, right? I'm running at 60 because that's what I capture at. But if you are wanting to play at 1080p, or if you can do it on 1440p, and you want to go above 165 frames per second, apparently it's not possible even if you have frame generation enabled, which is what this latest update brings. It's weird. It should just be uncapped. It's not the end of the world, of course, but it just harkens back to back in the day where you couldn't play BGS games beyond 60 frames per second without some sort of issue happening to your game. I don't know, man. I don't know why it's a thing. Someone much smarter than me is going to explain it in the comments. But speaking of FSR2, even though, as I said, it's not as good as DLSS anymore, and you shouldn't be using it if you have an NVIDIA card, at least there are some improvements if you don't have an NVIDIA card and you're still using FSR2, especially when it comes to ghosting. Ghosting has been lessened for particular circumstances, especially when you're shooting a gun and you see the bullets fly out. Apparently, there's much less ghosting in those circumstances, but ghosting is not completely removed in the game if you're using FSR2. In particular, they showed in that Digital Foundry video, if you're changing weapons, you can see a lot of ghosting, and even with some particle effects. So it's not perfect, it's improving, and I suspect that it'll improve, hopefully even more, but I don't know if they can actually get rid of all the ghosting when you have FSR2 enabled. But again, use DLSS if you have an NVIDIA card. But the really good news is that Starfield sees some huge performance improvements when it comes to CPUs. So at launch, CPU performance wasn't all that good. There were some poor frame times in the game, especially in cities like Aquila. There's a few others like that as well. And the reason for this was because of poor CPU utilization for many core CPUs, and now that has been addressed in the beta update. There's much better CPU utilization, so more people, as reported by Digital Foundry, are going to get a stable 60 frames per second experience in the game, pretty much hopefully no matter where you are. Again, in cities like Aquila City is the one that they focused on, but there are other areas in the game where you would usually see those drops, but hopefully now you don't see those drops. And they were even saying that some Ryzen CPUs are seeing an FPS increase of like up to 20%, which is huge. Like, this is good to see, good performance improvements. But there is one thing that Digital Foundry tried to temper this with, is that it is odd to see such a huge improvement so close to launch, especially from a single patch and with no visible quality reduction. Like, it is weird to see how much CPU performance has improved with this beta patch. And it does call into question how optimized Starfield was at launch, because clearly, if there was this huge headroom that could have been made up when it comes to CPU performance and utilization, then why wasn't that a thing at launch? I know it's hard to keep saying they should have done this at launch and improved this at launch, because you keep adding stuff. You can't do everything at launch. Unfortunately, that's not the way the games industry is anymore. But I would say FPS and performance is very important, right? It's one of those things that should be looked at. CPU utilization is one of those things that should be looked at. And I do also agree that, yeah, it does call into question why these things weren't fixed at launch, why the game wasn't as optimized as it should have been at launch. It is good that it's happening now, and pretty much if you even have a low-end CPU, but even all CPUs that they were reporting, mid-range, upper-end CPUs, apparently all CPUs are going to see a nice improvement in the game when it comes to frame rate and performance, which is really good to see. But what is not good to see is that apparently traversal stutter is still an issue in the game. I don't know why Bethesda Game Studios games suffer from traversal stutter just all the time. It goes back to Fallout 3, probably further than that, but I remember Fallout 3. Whenever I play that game, I always have to install a mod that removes the micro stutter and the traversal stutter in the game. It is mind-boggling how that is still an issue in BGS games to this day. And I have no doubt that someone in the community, hopefully, can implement a mod that's going to remove traversal stutter before Bethesda Game Studios does. But you would expect with all these other CPU performance improvements and GPU performance improvements that we haven't talked about yet, you would expect with all these improvements that Bethesda Game Studios is making to the game, that traversal stutter is one thing they can fix and just finally address. But they haven't. It's annoying. So you're all probably going to see some traversal stutter still in Starfield if you are playing. But it's the way it is. I don't know. It's always long annoyed me. But let's talk about that GPU performance improvements. There are a nice number of GPU performance improvements when it comes to FPS, especially if you have an NVIDIA card. And again, this is separate from DLSS. So we know that at launch, NVIDIA cards weren't performing as well as AMD GPUs, especially when it comes to cards that are considered equivalent. And in that Digital Foundry video, they compared a 6800 XT to an RTX 3080. At launch, there was a huge disparity in performance when it comes to FPS, but thankfully in the beta update, that gap has been hugely narrowed. So in fact, AMD cards also see a performance improvement, a little one, but more importantly, NVIDIA cards see a huge performance increase. So that gap, as I said, is really narrowed. And they were saying like with an RTX 3080, you're seeing frame rate increases of up to like 30%. That's massive, like massive. It's still not performing as well as the equivalent AMD cards. And Digital Foundry does say that that is strange to have very similar cards. They were even comparing an RTX 2070 Super to an RX 5700. It is strange to see similar cards from different brands perform so differently. In particular, it's strange to see the NVIDIA cards perform worse. But at the very least, again, months later, but the NVIDIA cards are narrowing that gap. They are increasing in performance, which is good. But it does call into question again how unoptimized Starfield was on PC specifically at launch. And I remember this, like when I was playing initially, I reviewed the game on an RTX 3090. Like, I didn't expect to see that low frame rate. I said specifically in my review, this game just wants to run at 30 frames per second, and I had to decrease everything to try and get it to run at closer to 60, but there were still some cities that the game would just drop below that. Now, especially with DLSS, especially with frame generation, it's just not an issue. I do wish we got this game or this update at launch. It would have been amazing. You can't ask for everything, but at the very least, it's being improved now. But what's not being improved, unfortunately, are HDR controls. Digital Foundry says it still doesn't look good. The game has a very flat look. It looks poor on modern OLED displays. I can't report on that. I don't use HDR because I have to use it with my capture software. But dark backgrounds can look grey and have a lot of banding. And the worst thing, and I want to talk about this, even though I'm not familiar with HDR, apparently the community HDR mod called Luma adds in real HDR much better. And this just shouldn't be a thing. It's a long been a talking point for BGS games about how they just let the community fix their issues. When you have a community implementation of HDR, an important big feature, right? It's very modern. When you have a community implementation doing better work than the official implementation, something is going wrong there. Maybe it's a bug. It's still in Steam beta, right? Maybe it's a bug that can be fixed. But this community mod came out much quicker and did a much better job. So I don't know why it's an issue. Hopefully it is resolved for those of you on HDR or using HDR with those monitors. But I would say all in all, like this beta update is actually really good. Yes, it does call into question the optimization at launch, but it's happened. It looks really good, especially if you have an NVIDIA card. You're going to be getting awesome frame rates. And I think it's actually a really good sign of the future of Starfield. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later when we talk about how many people are still working on the game. But I would say kudos to Bethesda Game Studios all around. It is a good update, and I hope we see more of them. I hope we finally see that long-awaited huge update that we still haven't got yet. But second of all, let's talk about Skyrim and Starfield. So there was a bunch of articles in the past few days about how, yeah, Starfield undoubtedly has been Bethesda Game Studios', or even Bethesda's in general, biggest game launch ever. They hit 10 million players. Sokana reported that Starfield was the best-selling game in the US for the 5 weeks post-launch, and that was excluding all the Game Pass shenanigans that happened. Still the best-selling game, and it was the 7th best-selling game of the year, and it probably would have been higher if Game Pass wasn't a thing, right? But even with all of that, apparently right now, Starfield player counts have dropped so low that there are less people playing Starfield than there are playing Skyrim on Steam. Now, to be clear, people not playing a game like 2-3 months after launch, especially if it's a first-player single-player game, it's not unexpected. There's always a drop-off. There is always a drop-off with new games, right? And let's not pretend that Skyrim didn't also have a drop-off. And it's Skyrim, it's Elder Scrolls. Like, I'll talk about that in a second. But yes, every game has a drop-off. But if you want to get into specifics when it comes to the numbers, if you combine Skyrim Special Edition and the base edition, there are currently, I think in the last 24 hours, the peak was 30,496 players, whereas with Starfield, it was 29,149 players. So yes, more people are playing Skyrim right now. And I didn't even add in Skyrim VR, and I don't know how popular that is anymore. But yes, more people are playing Skyrim. But let's be real as to what is actually going on here. I know that like people are using this to make clickbait articles and negative hit pieces on the game. It's just been a thing. Like, let's just... That aside, okay, I know that's what's going on here a little bit, but what I feel like is not fair is when people make articles about this stuff, which is fine, but not being more upfront with what's actually going on here. Because let's be clear, Starfield is a Game Pass title. Yes, Skyrim is on Game Pass, but millions and millions and millions of people own Skyrim and bought Skyrim before it was ever introduced to Game Pass, before Game Pass was ever a thing. So it later being put onto Game Pass, you're not getting that many people on Game Pass playing Skyrim that already don't own it, right? You know what I mean? Like, that's what's happening. But with Starfield, it was from launch hyped to be on Game Pass. There is no way it would have hit 10 million people playing it at launch if it wasn't for Game Pass. And it undoubtedly affects how many people are playing the game on Steam, because people are just playing the game as part of the Game Pass subscription, even on PC. Yes, even if you're playing on PC, a lot of you are probably using the Game Pass version because you didn't have to pay $60 or $70 or whatever it was. That has to be considered here. It's not fair just to say, well, more people are playing Skyrim now, but maybe Game Pass has to do with it. Of course it has to do with it. Of course it's playing a big factor. Yes, Starfield is not reaching the heights of Elder Scrolls. It's not reaching the heights of Fallout. And I wouldn't be surprised if Fallout 4 also overtakes Starfield sometime soon, especially with the new freaking remake or whatever the hell's happening next year, right? That's going to happen sometime soon as well. But it's because so many people are still playing Starfield on Game Pass. In fact, Starfield is currently the 7th most played game on Xbox, only behind massive multiplayer games like Fortnite and COD and Rainbow Six, Roblox, GTA 5 and Apex Legends. It's actually ahead of Minecraft. Friggin' Minecraft on Xbox. And Skyrim is ranked 28th, right? So 28th to 7th, that's where the disparity is. And I can't bring you hard facts if you combine Xbox and Steam numbers, what the comparison looks like. Journalists will make articles like this because they can, because there's no other point of comparison, because you can easily get the player count numbers for games on Steam. I get that, I understand. But I just wish they'd be a little bit more forthcoming with information like that. And of course, Starfield doesn't have official mod support, right? There was a natural drop-off, as there was with Skyrim after launch. But when official mod tools do come, and that'll be next year, and awesome mods come to the game, there will be more and more people coming back to the game. Because what's happening now, people have finished the game, and they're like, well, I'm done, and I'll wait till mods come out next year. I can guarantee you a lot of people are doing that. You watching this video, I guarantee you that you're doing that right now. So I don't think it's as big a deal as people are making it out to be. But yes, more people are playing Skyrim on Steam right now. Boo-hoo. Let's talk about the final topic. I got heated with that one. This is meant to be a chill video, but I got heated defending him. Anyways, the last topic that we have to talk about is how many employees are still working on Starfield. And I want to kind of spin this off into a discussion about the future of the game. So recently, Todd Howard did a video on Wired's YouTube channel talking about his history of being a game dev. And he revealed that currently there are 250 developers that are still assigned to Starfield, which represents about 55% of Bethesda's now 450-person crew. Right? So still 250 people working on Starfield, and they're obviously working on the patches that we just saw, the future DLC. Hopefully we still see Shattered Space if that's coming, which by implication, obviously it's not just like Starfield and Elder Scrolls 6 that they're working on. Bethesda Game Studios, like, probably working on a mobile game and a bunch of other stuff, right? But by implication, there's probably like 100 to 150 people working on Elder Scrolls 6 now. Maybe, and that would be friggin' awesome to see, right? Everyone wants to see Elder Scrolls 6 come out as soon as possible. But yeah, about 250 people are still working on Starfield right now. And that's a fair bit of people, right? It's not the entirety of the studio, but that's still a lot of people, and I think it means good things for the future of Starfield. This latest update, even though there were some negative points, HDR, etc., this latest update, in my opinion, does show that BGS is committed to Starfield. Right? Would it have been nice to see all these updates at launch? Yes, of course. But we're seeing them now. We know that they've committed to DLC. We know Shattered Space is going to be coming. Like, this is, in my eyes, a good sign for the future of Starfield, that hopefully eventually we'll just see like awesome DLC, mod tools coming in, and just crazy mods for the game. I am still bullish on the future of Starfield. I know there's been a lot of commentary lately about how, it was snubbed from the Game Awards and didn't deserve Game of the Year. Let's be real, Starfield did not deserve Game of the Year, all right? And I say this as someone that loved the game and played the game. You have other, I think, more deserving titles. Baldur's Gate 3 is going to win it, right? But other titles that were nominated, like Spider-Man 2, Legend of Zelda, like Starfield, I don't think deserved to be in that kind of echelon of games this year. It was only because this year was so good when it comes to game releases, right? If it was any other year, Starfield would probably be up there. It was nominated for Best RPG. It's probably going to lose that out to Baldur's Gate 3. But yeah, I know there's been a bit of a negative discussion about Starfield and how it's not as good as Fallout and Elder Scrolls. And I agree, it hasn't reached the height of those titles, but I still don't think that doesn't mean the game doesn't have a future. That doesn't mean it can't be a game that you love and that doesn't have great support in the future. I still think Starfield is going to be an awesome title. It is an awesome title, in my opinion. It's not as good as their past games, but I still think it's going to get a lot of awesome support. BGS has shown their dedication to the game. The latest update was good, and once we get mod tools, I think the future of Starfield is very bright. So let me know your thoughts. I got heated, bro. I can't help it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And until next time, this has been Lone. Please take care of yourselves, and would you kindly keep fighting the good fight.